Hey, and welcome to our second webinar. I'm really excited to have you here. Um, yeah, so let's get started. Today we're going to be talking about Ethereum tokens, and then at the end I'm going to show you this crypto portfolio, which is like an example of some use cases using our API. So I am Taylor. I am the developer advocate for Amberdata. I help people use our API and build cool things with it as well, which is a lot of fun for me. So what are we going to be talking about today? So first off, we're going to do a quick overview of what Amberdata is, just in case you don't know. And then we're going to look at what Ethereum tokens are. Just a brief overview from there. And then after that, we're going to look at Web3 Data.js, a JavaScript SDK that I developed. And we're going to look at how to set it up, what it's used for. And then the fun part, which is getting data using Web3 Data.js and Amberdata's API. And then finally, at the end, I'll show you off this Cryptofolio demo, and then a quick Q&A session. So what is Amberdata? Amberdata is a comprehensive blockchain and market data API. We've found a way to marry both blockchain and market data together, which increases the amount of context that you can have, because we really want to know and understand like all this value that's on the blockchain, how is it moving? And so bringing those two things together is extremely powerful. We also have dashboards and panels, gives you a visual insight into what's happening on a blockchain. As well, we do blockchain analytics, metrics, and security, which you can all see on our dashboards, as well as you can see that via some of our API endpoints. So here's an example of a few of our dashboards that you can see on our website. So different things that correspond to the network health of a blockchain. As you can see down below, this is the security portion of our dashboards. This is going to come up again later, so just make note of that. Okay, so our API, we have over 100 endpoints, and it's always growing. We have real-time and historical time series blockchain and market data, which is extremely powerful. It can be very difficult to get certain historical blockchain data. And so taking that data and then again, bringing it in with the market data provides an increased look at what's happening on the blockchain. We also have JSON RPC compliant methods, which enables you to send requests to our API as if you're talking to an actual Ethereum node. So quickly, kind of look over our documentation and kind of shows you here all the different endpoints that we support. And the cool functionality about this documentation is that you can actually use your API key as on any of the endpoints and be able to test them out in real time. Another thing we have is the WebSocket events. This is for the real-time blockchain and market data. As you can see here, some of those events. And then finally, some of the JSON RPC methods that we support. So what is an ERC20 token? An ERC20 token is the standard token interface for the Ethereum network. And then just as a side, Ethereum, our ERC stands for Ethereum Request for Comment. So this is similar to an RFC for web standards. Now, the reason that we have this standard token interface is so that exchanges and like dApps can predictably interact with this Ethereum smart contract. So we can understand and we can know what methods are going to be available and how that contract is going to operate. So the inception is about 4 years ago. This guy, Fabian Vogelsteller, aka Frozeman, proposed this token standard. He saw a need for this ability to standardize. The idea of doing tokens on Ethereum wasn't necessarily new, but the idea of having a standard so that there'd be interoperability was something that this guy came up with, which is pretty cool. And then about 3 years later, it was adopted formally as the standard interface for tokens. You can see the full definition if you go to this link right here. and it's a technical specification for how to build a ERC20 token smart contract. And you're going to be usually inheriting from an ERC20 token interface, which you're and essentially promising to implement these set of methods. Yeah, and so again, that gives us predictability when interacting with this contract. Funny fact, the original method name proposals for ERC20 token method names, crate check, cash check, transfer check, and even tear check for unapproved, which I think the last one was more of a tongue in cheek. You can actually go into the GitHub repo and read through all those comments. And that's how I found these little Easter eggs here. Okay, and a side note, ERC or EIP, those two terms get thrown around a lot. And so sometimes it can get confusing. So an EIP is an Ethereum improvement proposal. And so these are things that are going to improve the Ethereum network as a whole, right? And then ERC is more specific to contract standards. So essentially EIP 20 wants to improve the network by defining an ERC token or an ERC 20 token. And so that's kind of how that relationship works. Okay, so I wanted to also make one note as we're going through tokens about contract security. I think it's very important when we're looking at Ethereum smart contracts and trading tokens that we understand the security behind them. There's at times there could be vulnerabilities that could cause different things like hacks, which could affect the valuation of that token. So again, I kind of talked earlier about some of these dashboards that correspond to Ethereum security. So here's kind of an overview of all the security audits that we've ran. And particularly, I wanted to look at this. And these are specific vulnerabilities that you can find in any contract, but they're particularly interesting when we're looking at ERC20 tokens because those tokens do at times carry a lot of value, and so knowing if your token is secure, it can be very important in terms of whether you're going to invest in that token or not. And then here's an example. This is a Chainlink. We can actually see the security audit that was run on this Chainlink token. So it's good to know that's an A+. Although there's kind of a list of security audit details. So these are the things that this audit is looking for. And so generally saying like this is a very, very secure token. Although there's always things that people could miss. This is a really good kind of generalization overview of the security of that token. Okay, so from here, we're going to kind of transition, kind of briefly covered what Ethereum token is. Now we're going to look at getting an API key and then using that to start getting data from Amberdata's API and then looking at some of the Web3 Digest methods. So if you go here to our onboarding page, it kind of outlines the steps that it takes to create an account and then get an API key. And so it's like really simple. It's 2 steps. And then down here is kind of where we're at, which is we're adding our SDKs. So we're going to take the API key that we just got, and then we're going to use that in our Web3 Digest package. Okay, so Web3 Digest, again, is a JavaScript SDK that makes it easy for developers to start building with Amberdata's API. It's also good for traders, investors, and as researchers as well. So it's very simple, intuitive, and it's really easy to set up and get rolling. Okay, so it's pretty standard. You install it, you import it, and then you set your API key upon instantiation, and then you're ready to go. So after that, all calls that you make are going to be attached. The header will be attached automatically to get the data. Okay, so from here, we're going to look at different examples of using our API. So the first one we're going to look at is address tokens. So this endpoint retrieves the token holdings for that an address is holding. So given an address, we want to get a list of every token that address holds. And that's what this endpoint does. And as you can see, there's a few different things we can do in terms of filtering. And then we're going to look at, from here, we're going to move to look at an example of what that looks like using Web3 Digest. Okay, sweet. So again, we're importing our Web3 data package, setting our API key, and then we're going to do w3d.address.get tokens. I want you to note here, the namespacing with Web3.js closely follows our API endpoints. So if it's /address, it's usually going to be .address for Web3 data. So that makes it kind of easy to like connect the dots in your head. So here we're going to include price. It's going to give us that market data context I was talking about earlier. And we're going to sort by amount. This is the default sort type. I just wanted to put it there to be more explicit. So here, right here. So here you can see there's 920. So this address, our whale, actually owns 920 tokens, which is pretty cool. And right here is an array of 100 items. These are the first 100 tokens that we can see that this address owns. So let's just pick one here. So I'm not just so sure what this token is, but it's called, we call it candy. So here's the name of the token and the symbol of the token. And as you can see, we have different information about this token, like in terms of the decimals, what type of token it is, etc. This is the amount in the lowest denomination of that token. This is the amount that this particular address right here holds in that token. So if you wanted to get the base denomination, you'd take this number and you'd multiply it by 10 to the negative 18, or in other words, you'd take this number and divide it by 10 times, yeah, 1 times 10 to 18. And if we see here, we can find a token with, let's see, I think there's one with pricing context, but yeah, so as you can see, we have more tokens here, phantom token, and then its symbol. And so this is the first 100 tokens that this address owns. So I'm gonna check one more thing. Oh, as you can see there, it looks like the address just bought 2 more tokens. It's pretty interesting, or obtained 2 more tokens. Anyways, sweet. Okay. So from here, we're going to look at current historical address balance. Again, we're going to look through the docs and kind of see what we're working with here. So first, you put in an address, and we can get, this is for the latest balance, so we can get the current balance here, as you can see. And then if we kind of scroll up here, we can look at what the historical endpoint looks like. So this would be the historical balances for this address. We're looking at the balance of the address over time. And as you can tell, there's a lot more query parameters, a lot more filters that we have here, which is pretty powerful. For instance, we can ask at any point in time, was the value of this account balance greater than a certain value, which is really cool. And we can also include price here, which would, again, give us that additional pricing context that we wanted to. And we'll look at one more example of this. Okay, sweet. So first, we're going to get the current balance. And again, this is going to look like what we just saw in our docs because it's come right from API. And we can see the values included here. So I want to point out this. So with Web3 data.js, it will automatically switch between our current and our historical balance API, or endpoints. If it sees that you bring in, you're specifying a start date, it will know, hey, it looks like you want historical data. So it's going to hit the historical data endpoint. So the first response that we get is the current balance, which is right here. And the second response that we get from here is the historical balance, right? And so now you can see that this data has changed. And so right here, most of our historical endpoints are going to come with a metadata object, which is going to have a columns array, which is going to correspond the index to the type of data that's returned. So in this case, the index 0 is the address, and then the fourth index is the value. And so if we open up our data here, we can kind of see that. So we have like address, block number, timestamp, the nanoseconds, and then the value, again, in the lowest denomination of that of Ethereum. So in this case, it would be way. So taking that number and multiplying it by 10 to the negative 18 would give you the base denomination. Okay, So we're going to look at the token holder's historical endpoint. So our historical holders endpoint here. So we given an address. So this hash right here is the address. So given the token address, for instance, you could do this one's CryptoKitties. Give me a list of everyone who holds that token and give me a historical list, right? So we're going to specify our holder addresses right here. So let's say we had a set of 5 addresses that we know that are holding CryptoKitties. We can specify those 5 there, and it's going to give us the historical holdings for all 5 of those addresses. So this is a very, very powerful endpoint. It gives you a lot of context there. And this is what it'll be look like using Web3 Data.js. So again, we're using our whale address here, and we're going to look at this Pundi X token, and we're going to specify that this is the token address that we're looking for. So we want to, and then we're going to specify as a filter the holder addresses. So in this case, it's just this address. So we're asking, give me the historical holdings of this address right here. And we're going to include pricing data, and we're also going to specify that we would like ISO time format, maybe a little bit more easy to read than milliseconds. So again, we have our columns holder with an asterisk, which means that it's going to come back as the holder address, not necessarily, it's not going to say holder, and then the timestamp. Sweet. So as you can see here, we have the holder address, and then we have the timestamp. Since we specified to include price, we're going to get this pricing object right here. This is going to take the number of tokens multiplied by this number, which is the current rate that it's exchanged with, and we're going to get the total. So this is the total amount that this address owns in USD, which is about $422,000, which is a lot for this token. And that was at, just to specify, that was at this given time point in time. So if we kind of scroll down here, we can see earlier times at which and how many tokens that this address held at that time, which is really cool. Okay, so now we're gonna look at token transfers, and I just kind of wanted to pause here and kind of explain what that looks like. So token transfers are a different creature than a typical Ethereum transaction. It occurs within an internal message within a transaction, and it requires some decoding. So I'm going to go over here to the docs. So this is an RPC endpoint. So this is calling and asking for a transaction by its hash. We're going to get the raw data back from a Geth node. So as you can see here, this is a transaction. This is the value. It's in basic thing, but it shows us the value in ETH that was transferred in this transaction, right? But where's the token transfer? Well, it's possible that a token was transferred in here. We don't know. We have to decode this. This is where the token transfer would occur, right? And so that's kind of the way, the hard way of getting that data out. And if we look at a transaction on our website, we can actually see what it looks like for a transfer to occur. So in this case, again, we have our input data, and once we decode it, we find that this is actually a transfer. And if you scroll down here, we can kind of see that transfer in greater detail. So it looks like that this Pundi X token was transferred in this transaction. But again, we wouldn't know that just by getting the raw transaction data, right? We'd have to get the transaction data, we have to decode it, find the inputs, etc. Okay, or you could just use an endpoint. So we can use the token transfers endpoint right here, and this will give us a list of all token transfers by an address. So now we have the amount that was transferred and the transaction that we find that transferred in. So instead of having to go through the steps of doing all this decoding, we can just say, hey, give me a list of all the token transfers. Oh, and by the way, what transaction did that occur in? So that the decoding piece and all that takes place in the background, which is really nice. So if we come back over here, we'll actually see what it looks like using Web3 Data.js. So as you can see, a lot, look at that, like about 4.3 million tokens are transferred there from this whale. And we can kind of see a historical look at these transfers. Okay, so let's not use Tether. I don't want to use that as an example, but let's see here. Okay, so here's some token I'm not familiar with, but so here is kind of one of the transfers that took place that this address either transferred in or out. And so there's a lot of context that we get with that. We get the amount, the block hash, or the block that this transfer took place in. We have where the tokens came from. So here's the address. So I'm guessing this token received these tokens, it looks like. And then again, what I did is I include the price, right? So here we can see again, we're taking this quote price, multiplying it by that amount, and we get our total. So about close to $2,000 in a single token transfer occurred right here, which is pretty cool. Okay, so from here, we're going to go over to this Cryptofolio example that I made. And that actually shows us what it looks like to bring all those pieces together and build like a fun little example of showing historical token holdings, as well as bringing in the context of price. So this is something that we built to kind of showcase that. So I have a default address. You can put an address in here, and it will automatically, using the Web3.js methods that we just looked at, it will go and gather all the necessary data needed to build this this wallet, so to say. And so here we can see, I'm pretty sure this address, the one I'm using here, is one that we were looking at, the whale. So here you can kind of see this is the current balances that this address owns right here would be the value, and this is the value in USD, and then we can see over time how that value has changed, which gives us a really cool kind of view into that address itself. So basically what it does, we get the address and then we get its current token holdings. And then what I did is for the top 5 tokens, I did get historical holders for that token. And then I got all that raw historical data and I piped it into this chart. And that's kind of what you're seeing here. And then down here, we can see a bunch of token transfers. So this is kind of the last, I think, 50 or so token transfers that took place here. And you can just kind of see, you know, the amount of token that was transferred and the kind of the price and then what the token was transferred. And again, we just looked at what it looks like to grab that data using Web3.js. So it's pretty neat. This is available on our GitHub. It's an open source project. The one I'm currently working on is a fork. I will update the main one a little bit later, but I just wanted to add a few things for the webinar. But this is pretty cool. All right, sweet, right on schedule. So we're going to enter the Q&A time. So if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, or you can chat, send a chat message.